Everybody, welcome back. This is Nilson Carroll. They are giving NarraScope's only AI-related talk.
Cool, thank you. Cool, okay. You can hear me okay? Yes? Cool, awesome, thank you. All right, AI is obsolete, generative, glitch, narratives. What does that mean? Oh, that's what that means. All right, my name is Nelson Carroll. I'm an artist, curator, and educator working at the intersection of video games, queer theory and embodiment, and experimental film and video. My art practice engages with the live and digital body, chronic illness and violence, and actively interrogates patriarchal, colonialist binaries relating to sex, gender, class, and cultural hierarchies. I participate in a post-studio practice and have organized community projects such as the large-scale mutual aid project, the Queer Games Bundle, which directly supports queer artists in the small games community. I am also the assistant curator and preservation specialist at Visual Studies Workshop here in Rochester, New York, where much of my focus is on the preservation of our historical video collection. My work and my art practice are closely aligned, and each is informed by the other. As a curator at Visual Studies Workshop, I've been working to bring experimental and artist games here to Rochester. It's been very fun so far. This was a couple months ago. Barnyardia came to Rochester, so it was a trip. I have an affinity for experimenting, playing, and demystifying systems, and my preferences are non-saleable art, flashing lights, difficult puzzles, spatial poetry, and magic spells. Also note, I may use the titles Dragon Quest and Dragon Warrior interchangeably. It's the same thing throughout the presentation. There's also, I made sure there's no flashing in my presentation, but there are going to be a couple things that are blinking. So I'm just saying that. But I'm very sensitive to flashing, so the presentation is very sensitive to flashing. I think a lot about why I'm attracted to the glitch as a mode of operation. Traditionally, I cite it as a means to engage queerly with an existing text, to open its boundaries and to pass through its illusory walls. While working on the glitches I'm going to speak about in a moment, this was my guiding force, holding up a shattered, queer lens to focus or unfocus on games that I had deep relationships with. The glitch is a means of disruption, an interruption of binaries and types of rule sets. Glitches cross wires, rearrange verbs, and open paths. Through the glitch, there are new perspectives and new potentials. A few weeks ago, I was able to take a few days off to stay in the Adirondack Mountains up in central New York. I stayed in a cabin on Cranberry Lake, and it rained every day that I was there. It was quite lovely. I took many hikes through muddy, slippery, slightly dangerous trails through thick old forests full of bogs, carpets of mosses, giant slugs, and mushrooms growing on fallen trees. I was struck by how the forest organized itself, and over time came to see it as a parallel to the corrupted glitch game worlds that I had been working with for years. Trees fall into other trees and become one tree, or a tree falls and its body becomes the growing place for 3 different types of mosses, some mushrooms, some snails. Even better, the material that we might call organic, or coming from life, becomes intermixed with the bodies of stones, boulders, and mountains. A boulder the size of a house is covered in roots and has trees growing up out of its body, its underside growing mosses, fungi, and mold. Boundaries blur and bodies blur, but nothing loses its thingness completely. Similar to the glitches, one can pick out the symmetries and patterns of the plants and start to understand how these bodies relate to each other and how they affect each other. I became tempted to inscribe my human understanding of things to what I was observing. This is alive and this is dead, But as the rain began to pelt the forest floor harder, I noticed that all the plants, the mushrooms, the frogs, and slugs suddenly perked up, gained a new energy, vibrated a bit harder. As a queer person, artist, and scholar, I often find myself arguing and reacting against the binary, this idea of the binary, the tendency of our human culture to understand things in blacks and whites, yeses and nos, good and bad values. Famously, the binaries of male and female, and then gay and straight, have been and continue to be contested by queer folks and queer communities. This is just one example. Video games are totally constructed by binaries. The weak versus the powerful, the poor versus the rich, the victor lives and the loser dies. I'm under no false pretense that somehow what happens in the forest is natural and that what happens in human society is not natural. The binary of the natural versus the unnatural has done extreme cultural harm to the queer community over centuries of human history, and to uphold the natural here as some sort of moral high ground would be antithetical to what I'm talking about. Regardless, I currently see the boundarylessness of the forest floor as a poetic way of being and as a useful metaphor toward the glitch process. In both, there's a decentering of the self, the first person, the main character. To that end, I'll briefly mention my own provocative title to the presentation, AI is Obsolete. I'm not particularly interested in AI in the way that is often spoken about, this sort of all-encompassing marketing term that somehow ascribes value to tech products. I remember reading a thread on the internet maybe a year ago when someone was proclaiming that an AI that could generate endless stories and infinite content for games was, quote, the coolest shit ever, and referred to it as a type of fantasy console. There could be a whole other presentation about AI within the context of why artists and audiences connect with each other at all in the first place. But since this is just a presentation about me playing Dragon Quest III for hundreds of hours, I won't dwell on it further. When I say AI is obsolete, I refer to the idea of the generative narrative, or generative art as a whole, art created through the use of an autonomous system. Working with generative systems is an exploration. We can see this in the early years of experimental video from artists working at places like the Experimental Television Center or Media Study Buffalo, an exploration of tools that are designed to follow certain rules that can then be broken. There can be an exploration of creation through AI, perhaps, but where the randomization, sampling, and reappropriation of these glitch processes differs is in their innate handmadeness, the second-to-second decision-making that goes into playing a game that is breaking down. The performative play is dance between artist and game code. This is a total collaboration between artist and computer. This process is intuitive, fluid, and like walking down a muddy trail, dangerous. And I wrote in my notes here, I said, I swear I'll never talk about AI ever again. And I mean it. I became an artist interested in using games as a medium when I was about 12 or 13. During my early internet exploration as a young person, I quickly came to learn about the ROM hacking community. Folks interested in breaking old games in order to manipulate their code. This often took the form of language translation, small improvements to gameplay, or total reconstructions of a game world. I was particularly struck by a series of ROM hacks of Dragon Warrior 1 that replaced the game's content with crude bathroom graffiti, seemingly at random, while their makers, teenage boys often trying to out-edge each other, many of whom I've met online over the years, saw these projects as simply one-off jokes. I was immediately enamored with their broken, glitched out, sexually explicit adolescent poetry. These hacks opened my eyes to the possibility of games, their potential to be intuitively made, how raw they could be, and also to the power of appropriation and reinterpretation of already existing mainstream video games. In making my own ROM hacks, I developed a strong DIY sensibility, following and expanding on instructions found in ancient forum posts, using shareware made by friends, and in general, not following any particular designated rules or paths forward. Dragon Pervert, which I find myself always talking about, is a hack of Dragon Warrior 1 made around the year 2000. Dragon Pervert remains in my mind as the pipeline from hacks with dirty jokes in them to something more akin to Dada poetry, which I'd also grown fond of at the time. Sort of explosive, up to chance, sort of inexplicably made, and also coming with a very radical spirit. When hacking a ROM like Dragon Warrior, words in the text of the game will often only exist once in the code, and then will be referenced throughout the game each time that the word needs to be called. So for instance, when one changes the word maid in the game to a word like fart, the word mermaid then becomes merfart, etc. Also, often text limitations force the hackers to take creative liberties with how words are spelled and often truncated, which often results in this glitch-like, this absurdist poetry. Even better, Dragon Pervert has had so many different versions and rehacks over the 2 decades that it's existed, rendering the hack as a sort of a slippery, dreamlike narrative in my mind. I don't quite remember all of the things that are in it. The original hack was especially great. The one that I played when I was very young had the ultimate dream logic, basically turning back into regular Dragon Warrior completely about halfway through the game, which, as if to say, like, it was all a dream. Just super fascinating. Tingling with the game's code became a site of exploration for me, a way to play a game not in the way it was intended to be played. I was enamored with creating name tables, locating sections of code within the ROM using a hex editor, and slowly familiarizing myself with how the game's digital body was constructed. On a whim, I began to insert random variables into the game's code, where the code was not legible to me. Over time, if I was lucky, I started to notice small visual glitches in the game, but nothing too exciting happened during this time, this early experimentation. Flash forward to 2016, when I became reinvested in ROM hacking as I was entering into the MFA program at Visual Studies Workshop. I had tracked down one of the original makers of the Dragon Pervert ROM hack, and together we made a deeply queer, sort of punk rock ROM hack of Dragon Warrior 1. This hack was in part made through experimentation of editing the ROM's code in places we did not understand, disrupting its usual behavior. The hero speaks to the king, who recites dire, Gnostic poetry, but cannot leave the throne room to start their quest. A few years later, during the COVID pandemic, with a lot of time on my hands, which is actually sort of nice, I revisited the Broken ROM hack as a creative, performative tool. Influenced by both the chance operations of Dada poets like Tristan Zara and the Fluxus artists, I loaded a very small Lua script into the FCEUX NES emulator that, during gameplay, would randomly change 4 hex values in the game's loaded data every time the A button was pressed. This could affect anything from the game's visual graphics, the game's audio, systems of gameplay, numbers of lives you might have, how much gold you have in your pocket. This setup created an interesting type of play where the player is forced to corrupt the game in small increments just by playing the game as intended, because it's pressing the A button. Ghost Lion, which I'm totally obsessed with, Ghost Lion's introduction cutscene, for instance, would often crash before the game actually started up, simply due to progressing through the intro text boxes. This is one I pulled it up the other day, and this happened. I thought it was quite beautiful. I discovered a new challenge in Super Mario Bros. 2, trying to see how far one can get, where every jump that Mario makes slightly changes the game's code before the game would totally stop working. You would not be able to get very far. It was still quite interesting. Also, the image of Luigi's heads coming out of these plants is really fantastic. While using the script to explore glitches was satisfying, I decided to add an additional way of corrupting data by making the select button continuously corrupt hex values while being held down. This meant that I could greatly affect the game at any time, although more often than not, holding the select button down for about 2 seconds, which would change over 100 values, basically in the blink of an eye, would crash most games. What emerged here was a type of collaborative dance between player, controller, and game, or perhaps more closely related to playing an instrument, myself controlling tempos and rhythms of the game's song. Finding places to hold down the select button meant spending several hours with the game, learning where it was most sensitive and where it could stand total chaos. Corrupting a game on its title screen versus during a cutscene versus during gameplay or a battle scene held wildly different results from game to game. I found that during transitions between different game segments were full of surprises and became a favorite place to try my luck with hundreds of small corruptions. For instance, playing Zelda 1 and you transition from one screen to the next screen. When the screen is going up, that's like you hold the button down and then like the next screen loads and something totally magic happens. This was particularly useful during Ghost Lion's introduction cutscene, which I could now corrupt to my heart's content. Consistently, only father and daughter's bodies remained against the stark vortex of multicolored static. Their unique and strained bond, an emergent narrative I hadn't yet seen before. Maria, the main character, is confronted by her estranged father's disembodied jean jacket, breathing deeply, protecting herself from its psychic damage. Being able to interact with the games through this glitch instrument seemed to lessen the distance between my body and what was beyond the screen. The corruption process, totally randomized, but also completely reliant on my timings and the math of the game's insides, was a craft process, hand-driven, a performance in digital numerology. Every second of play carried risks of crashing or ruining a particularly interesting glitch that was slowly forming. I found that this process worked the best with NES games. I attempted a similar workflow with SNES, N64, Mega Drive, and Game Boy games, which ended up being all far more fragile to these corruptions. Not every NES game took to the corruptions, but many did, with some patience and lots of experimentation. Dragon Warrior 3, the game I spent the most time with, became almost predictable as I carried out the same sequences over and over again, testing both the game's code as well as its narrative. In Dragon Warrior 3's opening scene, your mother wakes you up on your 16th birthday to follow in your father's footsteps, who famously perished on a quest many years ago. It's like really nice of my mom to send me to my death. You are tasked to go on a journey to defeat evil, and your first destination is to go pay respects to the king. Outside of the castle, your mother's words stick in your head. If you go straight, you'll get to the castle. I worked with this scene in particular, taking thousands of screenshots over many afternoons, repeating the sequence, disrupting and engaging with its inherent themes of patriarchy, colonialism, inheritance, familial bonds, love, and violence. What remained of the game each time was not without its original context, a work of appropriation in a shattered mirror, or not unlike the borders of a dead lottery ticket. Watching my childhood home merge into our garden, my mother's duplicated body, or the text boxes emerging from her mouth, I questioned what is a body, what is an environment, what are the spatial qualities of words and of conversation. These digital bodies were revealed to be made of all the same stuff, sediment, billion-year-old electrons. Words and other forms of communications would switch with each other. My mother would speak from the mouth of a terrible demon, or move in the pattern of a belly dancer. Similarly, the king would often think my quest was already over, totally deflated, or he would think that I had already died. A common occurrence throughout would be my body becoming invisible at random, making it impossible to speak with the townspeople, or becoming dead, but still being able to move around without the game restarting or getting a game over. I would create dozens of sometimes well-labeled save states and make them loadable on key presses, furthering the instrument as a sort of temporal and spatial time warp keyboard. The save states were particularly useful in allowing me to return to spots right before the game crashes, which is very, very likely at any second, giving me more room to explore the changing world with shifting boundaries. There is a part at the very end of Dragon Warrior 3 where you have to use this item called the Rainbow Drop at this cliff to make the Rainbow Bridge appear. And I spent a long time with this one glitched save state, sort of getting lucky, but also nurturing it very carefully to move it along through many of the game sequences, and I somehow ended up with the rainbow drop in my possession at the right place. So I was able to use it. This is like very, very close to the end of the game. So I used it, and when I crossed the rainbow bridge, the game gifted me with this glitch text: "You are no longer invisible." The part in the game has you returning to the site of the final confrontation from the first Dragon Quest game, where the original player character also opens the path over the rainbow bridge. At this moment, the glitch seemed to reveal to me to be about this sort of emergent queer legacy, this powerful found lineage, not of DNA, but of queer spirit. The Untitled Dragon Warrior glitch poems, which I made during my residency through Welcome to My Homepage in 2020, explore yearning and longing, regrets and apologies. Using hundreds of screenshots and video and audio from my time working with mostly Dragon Quest 3, but also a little bit of Dragon Quest 1, 2, and 4, I pieced together a sort of reversed shonen quest hypertext adventure. The scenes unpack the Dragon Quest ritual, every rhythm and sequence, and with a critical and queer lens subvert the inherent colonialist and violent gameplay loops. The protagonist repatriates the artifacts plundered during his quest, reflects on his role as the hero, and as his father's child, reflects on his role as the hero and as his father's child, and searches for a lost, forbidden, queer love. The corrupted Dragon Quest world felt parallel to my own earlier ROM hacks of the game, as well as other RPG games that I had been making. The critical disruption of the assumed narrative, the able-bodied, cis-het hero who operates in a completely black and white world, was important to me as a huge fan of the games and a huge fan of and a lot of interest around the metaphors of RPG mechanics in general. Moving and removing the designed goalposts in the game allow for further interpretation and exploration of what was going on in the game, in its narrative, in its game mechanics, and in its audio-visual qualities. By returning to specific sequences, a new poetry emerges, possibly too niche, definitely too niche, and that it is best understood by those both deeply familiar with the games, as well as those who are open to the poetic chance operation experiment of the whole project. As part of my MFA thesis show in 2021, I exhibited the Untitled Dragon Warrior glitch poems as projections throughout the installation space, some of which were installed in old classrooms and against the existing furniture that was already there. I was interested in bringing the shifting landscape out into the bends of the live space around me, furthering this sort of pulling out of what was once only beyond the screen into the space in which my live body occupied. And so I've sequenced a handful of moments from the series to read in a second, but first I just wanted to make a comment about Akira Toriyama, who passed away this March. Toriyama was as many of you may already know, the character designer for the Dragon Quest series and also the creator of the iconic Dragon Quest Blue Slime. And through Toriyama's work with Dragon Quest and more famously the manga Dragon Ball, Toriyama showed us the mutability of bodies and the mutability of brotherhood. He expressed through his designs and stories something that we do not yet have much language for, but I would characterize as an inexplicably powerful shonen sort of friendship, love. Okay. Am I okay on time? Okay. Can I read a poem instead? Yeah, I'm gonna read the poem. I'm around. You can ask me. You can ask me a question. Okay. Nilson falls asleep. So come with your mother, but nothing is happening now. But nothing happened. but nothing happened, but nothing happened, but nothing happened. Nilson beckons the heavens. Time that you, Nilson, shall go to the castle. I have raised you as a brave young lad for this very day. So come with your mother. Nilson falls asleep, so come with your mother. But nothing is happening now. Sleeson is put to Ison is put to Neap is put to Ison. Sleep is put to Ison. Nisan is put to Ison. If you go straight, you'll come to the castle, Nils. Unable to move. This is the secret passage. Ghoul A is assessing the situation. Ghoul A chance animal. Ghoul doesn't have an item yet. Ghoul is numb and unable to move. Ghoul is numb and... Oh, Dad, you gave it away again. Haha, I couldn't resist. Wake up, Nilson. It's morning. Nilson grabs the knife giant. Nilson grabs the knife giant. Nylon needs 7222479 more experience points to go to the next level. The next level, oh, very funny. You can't depart on your journey with only dead companions. Dad gave it away again. Nilson, you're already 17 years old, entering adulthood. Listen, Nilson, you must always be righteous and... But there was no escape. Mummy Man attacks. Nilson's HP is reduced by 20. Escape. But there was no escape. Use, transfer, discard, but nothing happens. Hero, sex, male. Level 98. Slime's power wanes and its life comes to an end. Stick slime, cyber stick, cyber stick, cyber stick, cyber stick, cyber stick, cyber stick, cyber stick. Nilson examines the ground at her feet. There is no one in that direction. Yikes, whose voice is that? Huh? Did someone call out? If you go straight, you'll come to the castle. Remember your manners. Fight, spell, run, item. Fight, spell, run, item. If you go, you'll come to the castle. Thou hast defeated the Master Archfiend. May I offer thee my greatest gratitude? Nigjon is dead. Nilson is dead. Nilson is dead. It's a lie, isn't it, that you and used to be friends? It must be. There's no one there. Everyone speaks so highly of me, but what becomes of beauty that blossoms briefly, only to fade away? Input your name. Afflicted by poison. Poison. Soldier, pilgrim, wizard, fighter, merchant. Executioner on top, Nilson. Executioner learns new spell. The key doesn't fit. It's the key doesn't fit. You and used to be friends. It must be. Be well. Until we meet again. Leona is not afflicted by poison. S-O-N. Come to the castle. Time that you go to the castle. Nilson beckons the heavens. Welcome back. Come back again. You are no longer invisible.